Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 20th of June, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So we're on episode 358, Phil.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't had a special this week, have we? Unfortunately, I think it's as we start to talk through some headlines. Well, yeah, it is it. But we're going to talk through some of the headlines, and it's all about this reactivation and how busy the sector is, and that's kind of an indication of that, isn't it? That that there is a lot going on at the minute, and everybody's tied up with focusing on getting their businesses reactivated. In some cases more than others, as we'll mention, because it's the Scotland and Wales has been updated this week with their restrictions, and some of it has gone down well, some of it not so well, I think, on the latest announcements, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, good news for Wales, because as we record this, we've heard that dealerships will reopen on Monday, so that's good news. But Scotland, they're moving into phase 2, but dealerships can't open until the 29th of June, and that must be causing all sorts of resentment in the dealer network in Scotland, because they must be raring to go now.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's causing a lot of confusion. I mean, even the we talk about Wales, but actually you still can't. Is it 5 miles the limit on travel, I think, and that still remains, I think, for another couple of weeks until the next sort of update. So there's a lot going on, but I think this is clear indication around what the complications that a devolved government gives into it, that there is so lack of clarity, so much lack of clarity, and in terms of, if you think about our industry, there's operators that have businesses in Scotland, England, and Wales. There's businesses that need to try and get things in and out of each of those. That think about us as a business, collection and delivery of cars into Wales and out of Wales and into Scotland and out of Scotland, and there's no clear guidance as to what can and can't be done.
No, and you're right. There is a disparity because, as we know, dealerships in England opened on the 1st of June, followed by Northern Ireland on the 8th of June. But you're looking at a 4-week gap now between England and Scotland. And I did notice in one of the reports, the SMTA described the extended delay as devastating, which kind of sums up the mood there.
And one of the stories we've got today, the one that we've got Mike Jones from the ASC sort of giving their update in terms of the financial impact on April, that gives a clear sort of view of the financial impact that is hitting these dealerships the longer they are staying closed. This is the every week, every day, every month, there's sort of lost revenue. Lost income, lost revenue, which is unfortunate. But there is some pent-up demand, there is some activity, which is good news. So I don't know what your week's been like. I think it is a week now that there's a lot happening, that you can, there is things starting to happen, a lot of activity taking place across the sector, and as the businesses get back to some kind of trading at the minute.
Yeah, in terms of on a personal level, my lockdown week, I've had my second lockdown haircut, and I have, yeah. Not quite DIY, but
you had some help.
It involved scissors in the garden, and I'm sort of undecided about the results, but it'll keep me going for a while.
In the garden, is that to save on the vacuuming and cleaning internally? Was that the logic?
Yeah, that was the thought behind it.
Ahead of the rain and the storms that we've had.
Yes,
as well. Yeah.
But also this week, for the first time ever, I've got around to looking at building a website, So that's kept me fairly occupied and scratching my head as well.
You've not learned another language or another instrument, but you're building a website. So that's a new skill, isn't it? I think at the end
It
of the
is a
day.
new skill, yeah, because in the past, certainly when I was at Motor Trader, there'd be a department who would do all that for you, and there would be very knowledgeable people playing around with code and making wonderful things happen. So I'm kind of learning from the ground up, but it's interesting.
Well, a good friend of yours and mine this week commented on my haircut from being on a webinar, and it was great. Obviously, they only saw it from the front, which is something I can control with a little bit of a clippers and stuff. What they didn't see is the mullet that's on its way at the back there. That was probably getting a little bit more out of control. So I think we're starting to see the return of mullets. So the sooner we get hairdressers back open again and barbers will be happy days. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it was never a good look, even in the
No, it
70s.
wasn't.
So.
No, it certainly shouldn't return. Let me tell you, it's not a good look at all. So no, it's a lot happening. So we've had some great interviews that people should try. If they've not listened to them again, then head over to the website, themotortrader.com or the motortraderadio.com or the Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts and have a listen. You know, Devon Martin giving a good update in terms of their view on the current trading position around the values and some sort of foresight into what he thinks will happen. Dash Gupta giving a good view in terms of an AM100 dealership as they release some of their financials and start up again on the 1st of June. Grant Thornton's, Owen Edwards talking through some of the importance of cash control, which, you know, again, it's in one of the headlines this week talking around that same sort of subject of importance of cash control. And Peugeot's UK boss, David Peel, I mean, what a cracking interview that was, and getting that view from an OEM's perspective of, one, how they control going into lockdown and what's been happening through lockdown, and then obviously once the restrictions lift and open again and getting back to some sort of new norm. So some cracking interviews amongst others.
Yeah, and we've got plenty more lined up, so do keep an eye open for those. And also a big shout out for new listeners, because we have noticed that doing the midweek interviews does attract new listeners. So, welcome aboard.
Definitely. So we've got some selective headlines this week. I mean, it has been, again, yet another week of lots of headlines, lots happening, and a lot about the startup and activity in the first sort of 10 days of June, and also some on the impact of lockdown as well.
Yeah, and we've got an update on what some of the big dealer groups are doing in terms of jobs. Also, JLR, there was a report this week about possible layoffs there, and we've got an AM finally, which is looking at the government's latest take on how to encourage buyers into EVs.
Yeah. So it's
I'm not convinced. But we'll take a look at that at the end of the show.
EV is back on the agenda. That's for definite. I mean, EV is definitely back on the agenda from an OEM perspective, and as we still await what initiative is going to come out from the UK government to support the automotive sector sort of initiative and stimulus of the sector, but we'll keep an eye on that one. So
on with the headlines. So the first one this week is from Motor Trader, and the headline is used sales exceeding supply by 71% as market returns strengthens. I think there was a typo in that. Yeah, as market return strengthens even. So this is based on research done by Indicata on the first 10 days of June, which saw used car sales up by 3.3%. 4%. And this is something that we'll return to in another story and sort of put some context behind what these sales mean. But looking at the 7 days between the 4th and the 10th of June, the used car sales picture looks even brighter, with sales up 13.3% according to their data. And that equates to around 12,000 used car sales per day, which is, according to them, where the market was pre-COVID-19 lockdown.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, there's looking at sort of some of the activity throughout the full month of May, and you can see where there was across the European countries that Indicata represent in terms of their data. You had Portugal up 20%, you had Poland up just short of 20%, you had Denmark up 14%, whereas the UK was down 56%, France down 40%, and Germany down 4%. So you can see where this sort of restriction lift and the phased restriction lift from the UK versus some of the European counterparts has hit the UK a lot more. We saw that, we talked about it recently with the new cars, didn't we? And the performance for May around the UK used new car market versus some of the European new car performance as well in May. So hopefully, we'll get back on as Indicata has said there, that sort of first 10 days of trading has been very positive. Everybody's in a positive position from a used car activity. So hopefully that will continue through the month of June, which early indications and early data through the wholesale market is indicating that. It does show that there is activity there, but as always with these kind of things, there's sort of word of caution. How long that will last for is one that many of the retailers are keeping a close eye on at the minute.
Yeah, and interesting points that Indicata make on actual supply of used cars. So they're saying that dealers are being cautious about replacing sold stock with sales exceeding supply by 71%. And Indicata says this equates to the UK dealer network being short of 100,000 used cars against pre-lockdown levels. And just to give that a bit of context, the wholesale sector is up and running again, and there's an awful lot of vehicles to wash through the system there.
Yeah, you're right with that. I mean, that is the key with this. I mean, again, back to what we were just talking about at the start of the show with Scotland and Wales is still at the minute in lockdown, and that's the dealerships in those areas that you look at particularly the Scottish market. I mean, think about the dealer group representation across Scotland, the activity that they would be putting both into the wholesale market and the retail market. So there's still a lot to happen in the UK. We comparing to some of these European countries, the UK isn't necessarily fully open, is it? With sort of two main territories still having some kind of restriction, but as you say, there's a lot to get through. I think that's the bit with this. The lockdowns have been lifted, but there's a lot of stuff to get through from pre-lockdown. A lot of processes, a lot of orders to process, a lot of backlog to process, a lot of inquiries to get through, and in the thousands upon thousands, and that will take some time because you also at the same time you're working with some reduced resource levels as well.
Yes.
So efficiencies are down, so it will take a little bit longer.
Yep. So next story is from Car Dealer, and the headline is, "We sold 20% more used cars last week than we did this time last year." Now, can you guess who said that? Because it was all over social media. So this is Virtue Motors, and the story is based on an interview that Robert Forrester gave with the BBC Radio 4 programme You and Yours. Yeah. So in the interview, he revealed that the group had sold 3,200 cars last week, a 1/5 increase in used cars on the same period in 2019. Now, I actually shared this story on LinkedIn, and it got a lot of interest. I mean, I think, yeah, sure, Virtue, major player, and Robert's being very forthcoming about how many cars are being sold across the site. So just a bit of context, that's 3,200 sales across 120 sites in England, and let's not forget that Virtue do operate in Scotland, so they've got 13 sites there which are currently closed. So you sales up 20%. What did you make of this one?
Yeah, again, it kind of links back to what we were just saying before. That he's got 13 operations in the Scottish territory that isn't open, and you then look at what could have happened with that. You've got 3,200 by sort of 120 sites, so he's got selling what 26 units per site. Is that right now? Oh, hang on.
Oh, you have to get your calculator out for that.
I will do, yeah.
This is live maths.
Yes, yeah. So it's 26, 27 cars per site. So he's lost the 13 of those in his Scottish market. But again, we were talking about this before, and would you it's great. I mean, this is the bit that everybody's talking about, this pent-up demand. Everybody's out in the market. You've seen it through the wholesale activity in terms of that demand for product. Not every product, so we've got to put it in context that there is some weakness in certain areas, but they, as he's put in there, I think they're talking about what cars less than 9,000. Which there's definitely seen a shift in mix towards those vehicles. That's been seen in the wholesale market. I think we've talked numerous times on the podcast that seems to be where the market in the short term is going to be, as people are still cautious towards that public transport area. But is it can we look at this in true seasonality is one question that everybody's asking at the minute. Have we got a season now in 2020 relative to what was in 2019, or has seasonality sort of got out the window now, that year-on-year performances aren't quite as relevant as they would have been previously? And you've got to sort of think, how long will this last? We've got to keep it going as long as we possibly can, and talking with someone earlier today that a lot of the dealer network are saying, do you know what, take it whilst you can, get that business in, make the most of it at the minute, and hopefully June will turn around with the pent-up demand, the volume that's going through the retailers in the month of June, and sort of cover some of the deficit that they were left with from April and May, and give them a bit sort of put them further on track for the year-to-date performances as they may not be at the minute. So hopefully this will continue as we move through the month.
Yeah, and Robert makes an interesting observation in this. We know about the shift from people using public transport going into cheaper used cars. So obviously no PX is coming in on those transactions. But he does actually make the point that what they're possibly seeing at the moment is demand from people who won't be going on holiday abroad this year. So they've got possibly money sitting in the bank that is available to spend on a replacement car. And to kind of illustrate this, he talks about Virtue being overstocked pre-lockdown with VW camper vans.
Yeah,
they've sold them all now. so there is demand there for staycation buyers. So some interesting dynamics playing out here.
I think it really is going to be interesting the more that we progress through the remainder of the year into as to what dynamics, what trends, what behaviours emerge as a consequence of all of this, and which will remain. I mean, we talk about trends being accelerated, new trends entering the sector, new consumer behaviours emerging. So there's a lot to come from this as we move through. So hopefully a lot of it will remain and be good for the retail network. And then the next story, bit of a deep dive into April, and that's, as we said before, on AIM Online, and this comes from Mike Jones, as we said, from ASE, chairman at ASE there, that he's the opening statement that car retailers should focus on their cash position after the sector's businesses lost an average of £63,000 during April's COVID-19 lockdown. And that's from a positive position this time last year of 5,000, so a £68,000 shift. But we have to put this in that they haven't had the numbers as they would normally get from the submission perspective, have they?
No, they're 50% down in terms of data submissions, and Mike also makes the point that these figures reflect trading, well, if you can call it trading, but it was before click and collect was given the green light, which was effectively from May. So in terms of averages, it means 4 new car sales per site against an average of 38 per site in April 2019. But as you said earlier, year-on-year comparisons, we've never been in a position like this before, where they're kind of meaningless.
Yeah, and that is the issue with this, isn't it? That talking with somebody this week, that it's an interesting time, because how we previously to this, we've always looked back as that sort of 2008, 2009 recession period as this point in time, that why the figures were different, the activity within that period, the recovery of the numbers, and you always had to be conscious of that when you were looking back and doing any sort of annual comparisons and annual seasonalities. And this is going to be the same. There is, as you said before with Robert Forrester's interview, a new dynamic. The people are not going to be going abroad. They've had 12 weeks of lockdown where, hopefully many have been on furlough, and they've not been having the same expenditure as they would have done. So they have got spare capital to spend as they come out of furlough. People are thinking differently about priorities in life. There's a lot to come from this. But again, it's very difficult to do, like you say, an annual or monthly comparison at the minute, because we're in a new period of time. We're in a new season, aren't we, that we've not really experienced previously. So, hopefully, this £68,000 loss that on average across the dealers, but I say, put in that context that not everybody have submitted their KPIs, that we do see some recovery of that in this month of June, and make up some of that deficit. So it'll be interesting to see when we start looking at the ASE figures in probably August, September, October, a little bit further away from this, to see what this period looked like. So you look at your March, April, May, and June as a 4-month period, and see what that comes out like compared to the same period last year.
Yes. So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available online at motortraderadio.com and by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, and SoundCloud.
We need to start mentioning the ones that we're not on, I think, is the easiest way around this, maybe for the future.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that next week.
Everything but. But we're moving on to the next story, and this is a bit of an exclusive for AM, because I think there's, like you say, a little bit of a whistleblower possibly, or somebody inside there feeding some information. But AM Online have got the story that Pendragon plans job cuts and leadership changes. Now, I don't think this would be news to anybody, would it, really? Not necessarily about Pendragon, but there is a new chief exec, someone at the helm. He's got a new vision. He's got a new view for what the business will need to do. He's obviously been interviewed numerous times through this lockdown period, and we've also talked obviously around the dealer market consolidating pre-lockdown, and that there's a potential acceleration of consolidation due to COVID-19. as the manufacturers realign some of their partners and their sort of dealer network strategies.
Yeah, you're right. This story, as you say, is based on an unidentified source that AM have, and Pendragon actually deny that any large-scale redundancies will be taking place. But the source said a consultation that had opened over what the source describes as a small amount of leadership roles within the business. Now, some of Pendragon's 177 dealerships are also expected to remain closed since the end of the UK's lockdown periods, as the dealer group continues to review the scale of its UK footprint. So that does rather suggest that not all Pendragon sites have reopened yet. So we're going to have to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, and again, there may be some of them that are sort of locked up in the Welsh and Scottish markets as well with some of this. They'll be potentially reviewing, those that are, they can resource, they can open and can operate successfully fairly quickly. I think, again, you mentioned it there. I mean, 177 dealerships. That's a lot of businesses, a lot of resource, a lot of processes, a lot of systems, a lot of PPE processes to instigate, plan. There's a lot to go on, and that kind of, what we said right at the start of this week's show, that there's a lot happening, isn't there, and a lot to think about. So we need to put some of this in context. That for very difficult, possibly for 177 dealerships just to go, we're ready to go. There's a lot of planning with some of this, isn't there, that we probably haven't seen everything yet.
Yeah, and absolutely right. Next headline is from Car Dealer, and it's 17 jobs lost as Pentagon Motor Group closes Doncaster dealership in wake of lockdown. So this is an Alfa Romeo and Jeep dealership in Doncaster, which Pentagon only acquired back in as recently as 2017, and the site will close on the 30th of June. And as the only Alfa and Jeep franchises within the group, Pentagon do actually talk about an imbalance of costs. That they haven't got that cost efficiency across the group because they've only got the one site representing those two brands.
Yeah, and David Lewis, who's the managing director of Pentagon Motor Group, said that they regret closing the Alfa Romeo and Jeep business in Doncaster, but faced with the recent challenge of the coronavirus lockdown and the future market forecast for new cars, the site is no longer viable. But they do talk that the two, as you say there, Curtis, the two franchise operating Doncaster were the sole representatives of those brands within the group, which inevitably added to the imbalance of costs required to keep them in place, and very tough decisions are having to be made. And I think that's going to be, replicated across many businesses, I suspect, as we start to come out of the lockdown and see the true impact on viability and cash across many of these businesses. But you can kind of, again, similar to what we're talking about, you can understand it, that that sort of resource and efficiency of resource that is required. And we've done interviews, haven't we, so with some of the AM100 groups, and they always talk about that coverage, that efficiency of resource, that scale.
Yes.
When they're going into these sort of businesses. And I think Dash talked about it when they took over the recent Skoda sites, and it's about scale. So
yes.
that's what we'll be seeing with some of this, and I think we'll see that from a lot of the groups now, that they will be realigning their partnerships with many brands and looking at how that can be managed through scale.
Yeah, and the whole lockdown period has given dealer groups the time and the opportunity to actually run the rule over the business and maybe highlight some of the operations that have been underperforming and question whether or not there's long-term viability for them. So as you say, unfortunately there will be more.
Yeah. So and the next story, we sort of going over to Financial Times, and this is talking about Jaguar Land Rover to cut jobs, 1,000 jobs, as the car maker reels from a 500 million COVID-19 hit, and you know, some eye-watering numbers into when you get up to this level. But this is talking about JLR to cut more than 1,000 agency staff in the UK, and as you say, you know, was a loss of 500 million in the 3 months as the pandemic wipes out their profits.
Yeah, so the group has said that it would lose up to 1,100 agency staff or contractors in the coming months. And that's from its total UK workforce of 32,000 employees. And the move came as JLR lifted its cost-cutting target for March next year by £1 billion to £5 billion. So we're talking hefty figures here. And it's interesting that this week, I think it was after this particular announcement, Automotive News Europe reported on possible model cuts from JLR, which will be announced in the next few weeks. So we'll keep an eye on that one. So there's more to come.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I think there's when you start to look at some of the European, the sort of international view from an OEM perspective, and some of the say the sort of international news stories that are coming out, there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in that manufacturing, production, OEM sector, because they're impacted in terms of tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. As we talked to Lee Swinard from KPMG recently, there's a cost hit, an impact of supply, impact of efficiency, impact on workforce and productivity. So again, you could see that some of the manufacturers, they say that whether it's whatever comes from the JLR, we don't know yet. It's not confirmed from JLR, but you could see where some of them will be looking at some of the efficiencies and returns for some of the models, particularly in looking at it country by country, what they want to send over to the UK, etc., and whether they continue in the short term with it, because it might be a bit less efficient to produce and focus on other models. So we could see a wider long-term impact from this as we come out of it.
Yeah, and of course, Jaguar Land Rover has been hit hard by the downturn in demand for diesel, which I guess must represent the bulk of their car range, certainly on the Land Rover front. And interestingly, within the Financial Times piece, they highlight how badly actually the new Defender model is doing. So this is the car that was going to add incremental volume to the brand, and it's only had 22,000 pre-orders for this new model, which is more of a lifestyle vehicle than the outgoing model, which was a workforce. But they were banking on that to drive sales, but analysts said the figure was disappointing because it is only slightly higher than the number of old Defender models sold in the final year of production of 2016. So that gives them a bit of insight into the problems that JLR face.
Yeah, I mean this COVID-19, it's impacted on a lot of the short, medium, long-term strategies that many businesses, OEMs and alike, would have had in place, and be really getting a real impact on whether those strategies are still viable or not, won't it, for the long term? But we'll see. But the good news, we've got an AM finally, and the good news is if you are driving a pure electric car in the UK that is reported to be coming this autumn, October time, that it was voted in recently at government that you can have a green plate on your car and it can be retrofitted. So this is a story over in Motoring Research, and the headline is Electric Car Green Number Plate to launch in autumn. So the government have given the go-ahead for green number plates for the 100% zero emission electric cars and it will be introduced from, as I say, autumn of this year. Not that it's priority, not that there's other things going on at the minute, but let's get this right. We can have a green sticker, if that is what it's going to look like, on the side of our electric vehicle number plates.
Yeah, no. when I saw this announcement in the week, I just really did. Is this the best the government can come out with to promote the usage of electric vehicles? Giving, it's a green strip down the left-hand side of the front and rear plates, where back in the old days you'd have a EU flag, so now you can have a green strip. And some of the arguments for it were totally mind-boggling, because I saw one justification being that it would help identify cars using zero emission zones, but there's smart cameras doing that with registration plate recognition technology.
Or you can put a sticker down the side of your current number plate, whether it's 100% emission, zero emission or not. But
well, that's true.
Replace your GB or your EU plate identification with a green marker pen down the side. But anyway.
Well, I think you're right. This could drive sales of green marker pens. So we'll see. But really, is this the best you can do?
Sticker tape. I think somewhere in the apartment here, I've got some of that green electrical tape stuff. Put that on my plate. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I think there's a, whether it's timing or not, and this, I suspect this isn't sort of, this is something that preceded COVID-19, that was already in discussions and debate within government. There is still the huge green agenda. We know that with recent headlines around the scrappage scheme and things like this, that's been obviously very prevalent in the media recently. Is this kind of more of an ego thing, that it's a demonstration that you are driving a vehicle that is zero emission to your neighbours and people at work, etc.? Possibly. Is it a case that does it become a more identified something on the streets, that actually you start to see these plates coming around and drive in car parks, etc., and sort of gives you that sort of visual that there is an increasing number of electric vehicles on the UK roads, or there isn't many, or it could be the opposite. There isn't many electric vehicles on the UK roads, or nobody can be bothered going and getting the number plates changed at their local dealership to have a green sticker down the side of their number plate. But you know what? We'll see. It's coming this autumn, so we'll see how much the demand is. I think every new car that is then sold, they will be given the option, I believe. So it's not mandatory that every new car will be handed over with the green number plate. I think the option is given to the consumer or the driver of that vehicle if they would like the green number plate on their new vehicle or not. But they are talking about it being for vans, cars, taxis, motorbikes, buses, coaches, and HGVs can carry these green plates. So one to watch out for.
Yeah, although I rather suspect we won't be seeing many green HGV plates in the immediate future. But just following up, finally on this story, there was research done last year into whether or not motorists actually want green identifiers on their registration plates, and only 1 in 5 said yes. So not even the owners want it.
Yeah, and where's the cost for the retrofitted ones? Is the customer going to, they're going to go and buy a set of plates to have the green bit on them? It's questionable, isn't it? But I understand it, and this is the wider picture into around that the government and the whole green agenda, and it's the right thing. But it doesn't. Not everything green has to be electric. we need to that's something that we need to be mindful with. There is efficient non-electric cars. There is good hybrid products. There is good petrol and diesel products on the engines on the market that are that sort of good for the environment. Well, not as bad for the environment, should we say? But again, one to keep an eye on. But yeah, lots going on.
Yeah. And let's just hope they don't issue similar identifiers for diesel and petrol cars.
So you get a black, yes,
yeah,
black skull on the side of your diesel number plate. Yeah, maybe
yes.
not. We'll see.
Okay, well, that's it for this week. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for listening. Do join Philip and I again next weekend, and do look out for the latest in our series of special interviews with industry leaders and analysts. So until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.